The radio crackled with static and something else, panic. In the pre-dawn darkness of forward operating base Kandahar, intelligence officers huddled around glowing screens, their faces painted blue by the harsh light of satellite feeds. What they were seeing defied explanation. 12 hours earlier, SEAL Team 6 had vanished into the Hindu Kush Mountains on a high-value target mission. The last transmission had been routine, package secured, requesting immediate extraction. Then silence. The mystery deepened when reconnaissance drones revealed something impossible. The extraction zone, a barren plateau surrounded by enemy positions, showed no signs of the team. No bodies, no wreckage, no blood trails. Just empty rock and the whisper of wind through ancient stone. Even more troubling were the thermal signatures, or lack thereof. The Taliban fighters who had surrounded the area were gone too, leaving behind only abandoned positions and the ghostly outline of extinguished fires. Major Reese Nakamura stood at the edge of the operations center, her weathered flight suit hanging loose on her compact frame. At 34, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen too much and survived it all. Her fingers traced the worn fabric of her call sign patch, Phoenix. Most people assumed it was some inspirational nonsense about rising from ashes. They were wrong. Ghost Flight, this is base command. The radio operator's voice cut through the tension. We have a situation developing in grid 2847. Recommend immediate reconnaissance sweep. Nakamura's eyes narrowed. She knew that grid reference. 3 months ago, she had pulled a wounded Ranger unit out of that exact location, threading her Black Hawk between mountain peaks while Taliban mortars lit up the sky like deadly fireworks. The briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as officers debated options. Some called for massive airstrikes. Others wanted to wait for satellite confirmation. But Nakamura saw something in the drone footage that others missed, subtle disturbances in the sand patterns, the way shadows fell across certain rock formations. Someone had been there recently, and they were good at hiding their tracks. Colonel Hayes, the base commander, caught her eye across the room. His expression was unreadable, but she recognized the look. It was the same expression he'd worn 6 months ago when the Pentagon had quietly tried to transfer her to a desk job in Germany. The same look he'd given her after the incident in Fallujah that had made her call sign more than just a symbol. Phoenix, Hayes said quietly, his voice carrying across the sudden silence in the room. You seeing what I'm seeing? She nodded slowly, her dark eyes reflecting the screen's glow. Somewhere in those mountains, 12 of America's finest warriors were either dead or desperately fighting for their lives. And if the thermal readings were accurate, time was running out faster than anyone realized. The room held its breath, waiting for her assessment. Outside, the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, painting the sky the color of old blood. In the distance, a Black Hawk's rotors began their familiar whine, cutting through the mountain air like a promise of salvation or a harbinger of doom. The mystery of the vanished SEALs was about to become Phoenix's burden to solve. Nakamura's reputation preceded her like a shadow. 3 tour, 47 combat missions, and a chest full of medals she never wore. But the whispers followed her too. Some called her lucky. Others, especially the younger pilots fresh from flight school, called her reckless. They pointed to her tendency to fly impossible missions, to push aircraft beyond their limits, to find landing zones where none should exist. What they didn't understand was that luck had nothing to do with it. The Phoenix call sign had been earned in the burning wreckage of Fallujah, when her original Black Hawk, designated Angel 7, had taken a direct hit from an RPG during a medical evacuation. The explosion had killed her co-pilot instantly and left her with burns across 20% of her body. But somehow, impossibly, she had kept the aircraft airborne long enough to deliver 6 wounded Marines to safety before crash landing in an irrigation ditch 3 miles from friendly lines. The rescue team found her 12 hours later, unconscious but still clutching the cyclic control, her flight helmet cracked down the middle like an eggshell. The medics said she should have died. The aircraft engineers said the helicopter should never have flown. But Phoenix had a different relationship with death than most people. She understood it, respected it, but refused to let it dictate the terms of engagement. Now, as she studied the satellite imagery of the missing SEALs, that same stubborn defiance flickered in her chest. The thermal signatures told a story that made her blood run cold. The Taliban positions weren't just abandoned. They were too neat, too clean. Real retreats left debris, abandoned equipment, signs of hasty evacuation. This looked orchestrated, like a trap waiting to spring. Colonel Hayes approached her position at the tactical display, his boots echoing hollow against the concrete floor. "What's your assessment, Major?" His voice carried the weight of command, but also something else, trust. It was Hayes who had fought to keep her in theater when the Pentagon Review Board had tried to ground her permanently. He understood that some pilots saw patterns others missed, felt the rhythm of the battlefield in ways that couldn't be taught in flight school. "Sir, I think we're looking at a deliberate ambush scenario," Phoenix replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her system. "The enemy knew our extraction protocols, knew exactly where the SEALs would call for pickup. They let them complete the mission, then closed the trap." She traced her finger across the digital map, highlighting the concentric circles of abandoned positions. Classic hammer and anvil formation, but executed with unusual discipline. The implications hung heavy in the morning air. If Phoenix was right, then SEAL Team 6 had walked into something far more sophisticated than a routine Taliban patrol. This suggested foreign advisors, professional military training, possibly even special operations forces from a hostile nation. The kind of enemy that didn't take prisoners for propaganda purposes, but for intelligence extraction. Hayes nodded grimly, his weathered face reflecting years of similar conversations in similar rooms. Time factor. Phoenix consulted her tablet, cross-referencing the last known position with typical movement rates through mountainous terrain. If they're moving the team to a secure location for interrogation, we have maybe 6 hours before they disappear completely into the cave networks. Her fingers drummed against her thigh, a nervous habit she developed during her recovery. "After that, sir, we're looking at a needle in a haystack scenario across 300 square miles of hostile territory." The weight of 12 lives pressed down on the operations center like a physical force. Everyone understood the mathematics of special operations: high risk, high reward, with failure measured in flag-draped coffins and classified after-action reports. But understanding didn't make the decisions any easier. Phoenix felt the familiar tightness in her chest that preceded every dangerous mission. It wasn't fear exactly, more like recognition. The sky was calling to her again, demanding another impossible flight into harm's way. She looked at her hands, noting the faint scars that crisscrossed her knuckles like a roadmap of close calls and hard landings. Each mark told a story of someone brought home, someone given another chance to see their family. Colonel Hayes was studying her face, reading the micro-expressions that revealed her internal calculations. "Phoenix," he said quietly, "I need to know you're thinking clearly about this. The terrain analysis shows minimum safe approach altitude at 8,000 feet, but the mountains in that sector peak at 9,500. That leaves you maybe 600 feet of maneuvering room, assuming perfect weather conditions." He paused, letting the numbers sink in. "Current meteorological reports show variable winds, possible morning fog, and cloud ceiling dropping throughout the day." She met his gaze without flinching. "Sir, with respect, when has weather ever been perfect for this kind of operation?" The question hung between them, loaded with shared history. Both had seen too many missions scrubbed due to environmental factors, while good people died waiting for ideal conditions. The SEALs didn't wait for perfect weather when they went in. I don't see why we should wait for it to bring them home. Outside, the sound of rotors grew louder as maintenance crews conducted pre-flight checks on the Black Hawks. Phoenix could identify each aircraft by the subtle variations in their engine signatures. Whiskey 7, with its slightly rough idle from a bullet-damaged turbine housing. Delta 4, with the high-pitched whine that indicated bearing wear in the main rotor assembly. These machines were veterans too, scarred by combat but still airworthy, still dangerous in the right hands. The satellite feed updated with new imagery, and Phoenix felt her pulse quicken. Something had changed in the target area. Where 12 hours earlier they had seen empty positions, now there were heat signatures moving along the ridgelines. Small groups, possibly scouts or forward observers, but moving with purpose toward the valley floor. Whatever the enemy had planned, it was already in motion. The briefing room erupted in controlled chaos as intelligence analysts began updating threat assessments and plotting potential courses of action. But Phoenix's attention was focused on something else entirely, a pattern in the terrain that most people would miss. The way the shadows fell across certain ravines, the positioning of what looked like natural rock formations but might be something else entirely. Her mind began constructing a three-dimensional map of the area, identifying potential landing zones, escape routes, and fields of fire. Colonel Hayes noticed her intense focus and moved closer. "What are you seeing that we're missing?" Phoenix pointed to a section of the satellite image where a narrow valley cut between two steep ridges. "Sir, look at this drainage pattern here. It's too straight to be completely natural, and the vegetation is different from the surrounding area. I think there might be an underground water source, possibly even artificial irrigation." She traced the suspected course with her finger. "If I'm right, that could be where they're holding the team. Hidden facility, natural camouflage, multiple escape routes through the cave system." The analysis made tactical sense, but it also complicated any rescue attempt exponentially. Underground facilities were notoriously difficult to assault from the air, and the mountain terrain limited options for ground-based operations. Phoenix could see the calculations running behind Hayes' eyes as he weighed the probabilities and risks. "Assuming you're correct about the location," Hayes said slowly, "how do we extract 12 people from a fortified underground position without getting everyone killed in the process?" It was the question that made or broke careers, the kind of tactical puzzle that separated competent officers from legendary ones. Phoenix had earned her reputation solving exactly these kinds of impossible equations. She studied the topographical data, noting elevation changes, wind patterns, and potential approach vectors. "Sir, conventional extraction protocols won't work here. Too much enemy fire from elevated positions, too many ways for them to collapse tunnel entrances and bury the evidence." Her voice took on the focused intensity that her crew chiefs recognized as a prelude to something spectacular or terrifying. "But if we can create a diversion elsewhere, draw their attention away from the primary facility, we might have a narrow window to get in and out before they can react." The plan forming in her mind was audacious even by Phoenix's standards. It would require precise timing, perfect execution, and more than a little luck. But as she looked around the operations center at the faces of intelligence officers, pilots, and ground personnel, she saw something that gave her confidence, the same desperate determination that had driven her through 3 combat tours and 47 missions. These people understood that sometimes the only way to save lives was to risk everything. Colonel Hayes was nodding slowly, recognizing the look in Phoenix's eyes. He had seen it before, right before she attempted maneuvers that defied both physics and common sense. "Major, I need to hear your complete tactical assessment before I can authorize any rescue attempt." His voice carried the weight of command responsibility, but also the trust of someone who had watched her bring home the impossible more times than probability should allow. Phoenix straightened, her pilot's instincts taking over as she began to translate battlefield intuition into actionable intelligence. "Sir, based on enemy movement patterns and terrain analysis, I believe we have approximately 4 hours before they move the hostages to a more secure location deeper in the cave system. The thermal signatures suggest a force of maybe 30 to 40 enemy combatants, which is large enough to provide security but small enough to move quickly through mountain terrain." She gestured to the satellite display, highlighting key tactical features. The natural choke points here and here would allow a small air assault team to establish overwatch positions while extraction aircraft approach from the valley floor. But the critical factor is timing. We need to hit them during the narrow window when they're focused on moving the prisoners, not defending the facility. Hayes absorbed the tactical picture, his experienced eye catching details that might escape junior officers. The mountain warfare environment presented challenges that desert or jungle operations never faced. Altitude affected aircraft performance, weather changed without warning, and the rocky terrain could turn routine landings into controlled crashes. Phoenix, level with me. What are the actual odds of bringing everyone home alive? The question hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Phoenix had learned long ago that honest assessments saved more lives than optimistic projections, even when the truth was uncomfortable. Sir, realistically, maybe 60% chance of successful extraction, assuming everything goes according to plan. She paused, meeting his gaze directly. But if we don't attempt rescue within the next few hours, those odds drop to near zero. Sometimes the choice isn't between good options and bad options. It's between bad options and catastrophic ones. The mathematics of warfare were brutal in their simplicity. 12 American lives hung in the balance, weighed against the risks to rescue forces and the potential for mission failure. But Hayes had learned to trust Phoenix's instincts, especially when conventional wisdom suggested impossible odds. Her track record spoke for itself. 47 missions, 0 friendly casualties under her direct command, and an uncanny ability to find solutions where others saw only problems. "What do you need?" Hayes asked, the question serving as both authorization and challenge. Phoenix felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded every dangerous mission, the sensation of stepping off a cliff and trusting her wings to catch her. 2 Black Hawks, full fuel, and my best crew chiefs. Also, I'll need clearance for immediate departure. No flight plan filing, no weather briefings, no safety inspections beyond basic airworthiness. She paused, calculating fuel consumption and flight times. "And sir, I'll need you to trust me when I deviate from standard approach procedures." Hayes nodded, understanding that Phoenix operated by different rules when lives were on the line. Her methods weren't taught in flight school because they couldn't be systematized or reduced to procedural checklists. They required intuition, experience, and a willingness to embrace risk that most pilots found terrifying. "You have whatever you need, Major. Bring our people home." The operations center shifted into high gear as the rescue mission received official authorization. Intelligence officers began updating target folders, communication specialists coordinated frequencies and call signs, and maintenance crews performed final checks on the designated aircraft. But Phoenix was already moving, her mind shifting into the focused state that had kept her alive through 3 combat deployments and countless impossible missions. She found her crew chief, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, supervising pre-flight inspections on Black Hawk 77. Santos was a 20-year veteran whose hands could diagnose mechanical problems faster than most computers, and whose calm competence had saved Phoenix's life on more than one occasion. "Sergeant, we have a priority rescue mission launching in 30 minutes. I need full combat load, extra ammunition, and medical supplies for 12 casualties." Santos didn't ask questions. She had learned that Phoenix's emergency missions usually involved circumstances too classified or too dangerous for detailed briefings. Instead, she began orchestrating the controlled chaos of combat preparation with the efficiency that came from years of practice. "Ma'am, 77 is showing minor hydraulic pressure fluctuations in the primary system, but backup systems are solid. Do you want me to swap aircraft?" Phoenix considered the options, weighing mechanical reliability against time constraints. "How minor are we talking, Sergeant?" Santos consulted her maintenance log, running calculations in her head. "Probably wouldn't cause problems under normal flight conditions, but if you're planning anything particularly aggressive." She left the sentence unfinished, knowing that Phoenix's missions rarely qualified as normal flight conditions. The decision crystallized with the clarity that came from experience. "We go with 77. I trust your assessment of the aircraft, and I need every minute we can save." Phoenix grabbed her flight helmet from the equipment locker, checking the communication systems and night vision interfaces. The familiar weight of the helmet felt like putting on armor before battle, protective, purposeful, and somehow reassuring despite the dangers ahead. As she walked toward the aircraft, Phoenix caught sight of her reflection in the hangar's polished metal doors. The woman staring back looked older than 34, marked by the kind of experiences that aged people from the inside out. But her eyes still held the fire that had driven her through flight school, through combat training, through the long nights when wounded soldiers depended on her skills to see another dawn. The Black Hawk sat on the tarmac like a predatory bird, its rotor blades folded back and engines silent but ready. Phoenix ran her hands along the fuselage, feeling for stress fractures or battle damage that might compromise the mission. The aircraft bore scars from previous encounters, patched bullet holes, replaced panels, and the kind of worn edges that came from hard use in unforgiving environments. But like Phoenix herself, the helicopter had proven its resilience under fire. Santos appeared at her elbow, holding the pre-flight checklist and wearing the expression that Phoenix had learned to recognize as controlled concern. "Ma'am, I took the liberty of reviewing the weather reports for your probable area of operations. High winds, scattered thunderstorms, and cloud ceiling dropping throughout the day." She handed Phoenix the meteorological data, her voice carefully neutral. "Just wanted to make sure you had all the available information." Phoenix scanned the weather report, noting wind speeds and visibility projections. The conditions were marginal at best, bordering on dangerous for the kind of precision flying that mountain rescue required. But the SEAL team didn't have the luxury of waiting for perfect weather, and neither did she. "Thanks, Sergeant. Weather's never been perfect for any mission worth flying." The pre-flight inspection revealed no additional concerns beyond the minor hydraulic issue Santos had identified. Phoenix methodically checked control surfaces, engine intakes, and rotor assemblies with a thoroughness that separated careful pilots from dead ones. Each component represented a potential point of failure, but also an opportunity for creative problem-solving if systems began degrading during flight. Colonel Hayes appeared as Phoenix completed her external inspection, his presence adding weight to the moment. "Final intelligence update," he said, handing her a sealed folder. "Satellite imagery shows continued movement in the target area, but also something else, possible friendly signals using standard extraction protocols." His voice carried cautious optimism tempered by tactical realism. Could be the SEALs are still operational and attempting to establish communication. Phoenix absorbed the new information, updating her mental picture of the tactical situation. Friendly forces still operational meant the mission had shifted from recovery to active rescue, which changed the risk calculations significantly. Live teammates could provide intelligence, assist with security, and help coordinate extraction timing. But they also represented additional variables in an already complex equation. "Sir, if the team is still operational, that changes our approach vector significantly," Phoenix said, studying the satellite imagery. "We can coordinate with them for diversionary actions, possibly even establish a secure landing zone away from the main enemy positions." Her finger traced potential flight paths across the terrain map. "But it also means we need to move faster. Operational teams in that environment won't stay viable for long without resupply." Hayes nodded, understanding the tactical implications. "Phoenix, I'm authorizing immediate launch. Bring everyone home." The words carried the weight of command responsibility, but also personal trust built through shared experiences and mutual respect. Phoenix saluted crisply, then turned toward her aircraft, her mind already shifting into the focused state that would carry her through the next few hours. Staff Sergeant Santos had the engine spooling up by the time Phoenix reached the pilot's seat, their familiar whine cutting through the morning air like a promise of action. The instrument panel came alive with green lights and steady readings, confirming that Black Hawk 77 was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead in the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan. As Phoenix lifted off from forward operating base Kandahar, The first rays of sunlight painted the Hindu Kush mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Below, the Afghan landscape stretched endlessly toward the horizon, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Somewhere in those peaks, 12 American warriors waited for salvation, their lives depending on the skills and courage of a pilot whose call sign had been earned in fire and proven in blood. The rescue mission began with the steady thrum of rotor blades cutting through thin mountain air, carrying Phoenix toward another impossible mission and another chance to justify the faith that others placed in her abilities. Behind her, forward operating base Kandahar grew smaller until it disappeared entirely, leaving only the vast expanse of hostile territory and the promise she had made to bring everyone home alive. Phoenix banked the Black Hawk toward the target coordinates, her hands steady on the controls despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. The morning sky stretched endlessly ahead, painted in the colors of hope and danger that had defined her entire military career. In the distance, mountains rose like ancient sentinels, keeping their secrets hidden in shadow and stone. But Phoenix had spent her career wresting secrets from unwilling terrain, finding paths where none existed, and bringing light into the darkest corners of the world's battlefields. Today would be no different. The SEALs were waiting, and she was coming to bring them home, no matter what stood in her way. The sky called to her with the same voice that had shaped her destiny, and she answered with the confidence of someone who had never failed to keep her promises to the warriors who depended on her skills. The hunt for the missing SEALs had begun, and Phoenix was in her element, alone above hostile territory, with only her skills, her aircraft, and her unwavering determination to tip the scales toward justice. The mountains might keep their secrets from others, but they would yield their mysteries to her, one way or another. Time was running out, but Phoenix had made her career from racing against impossible deadlines and winning when victory seemed beyond reach. As the Black Hawk disappeared into the morning haze, heading toward the coordinates where 12 American heroes waited for rescue, the only sound remaining at forward operating base Kandahar was the whisper of wind across empty concrete and the distant promise of rotors returning home. Phoenix was airborne, and that meant hope was alive in the Hindu Kush mountains, carried on the wings of a pilot whose legend was still being written in the sky above Afghanistan's unforgiving peaks. The radio crackled to life as Phoenix guided her Black Hawk deeper into the mountain terrain, the familiar voice of the base radio operator cutting through static and engine noise. Phoenix 77, this is base command. Latest intelligence indicates possible enemy reinforcements moving toward your area of operations. Estimate company strength force, mixed Taliban and possible foreign advisors. Phoenix acknowledged the transmission with professional calm, though her mind was already calculating the tactical implications. A company strength force meant roughly 100 to 120 fighters, far more than the initial assessment of 30 to 40. The presence of foreign advisors suggested better training, superior equipment, and more sophisticated tactics than typical Taliban operations. Her rescue mission had just become significantly more complicated. She adjusted her flight path to approach the target area from an unexpected vector, using the mountain ridges to mask her approach signature. The Black Hawk's engines echoed off the rocky peaks, but the sound was distorted and directionalized by the terrain, making it difficult for enemy forces to pinpoint her exact location. Phoenix had learned to use the mountains as allies, letting their ancient bulk hide her intentions until the moment she chose to reveal herself. Staff Sergeant Santos monitored the aircraft systems from her position behind Phoenix, her trained eyes scanning instrument readings and maintaining constant awareness of their mechanical status. "Ma'am, hydraulic pressure is holding steady, but I'm seeing minor fluctuations in the secondary electrical system. Nothing critical yet, but worth monitoring." Her voice carried the calm professionalism that Phoenix had come to depend on during dangerous missions. The terrain below shifted from barren ridges to a series of interconnected valleys, each one potentially hiding enemy positions or friendly forces in need of rescue. Phoenix's eyes moved constantly between the landscape and her instruments, building a three-dimensional tactical picture that would guide her decisions in the critical moments ahead. She had learned that successful mountain warfare depended on understanding the relationship between elevation, weather, and human behavior. A new voice broke into the radio traffic, weak and distorted but unmistakably American. Any station, this is Eagle 6. We have 12 souls requiring immediate extraction from grid 2847. Say again, Eagle 6 requesting immediate extraction. The transmission was brief and professional, following standard protocols, but Phoenix could hear the underlying tension that came from desperate circumstances. Phoenix keyed her microphone, careful to maintain operational security while providing reassurance to the trapped SEALs. Eagle 6, this is Phoenix 77 en route to your location. Confirm your status and available security. She kept her voice steady and confident, projecting the kind of calm competence that could mean the difference between panic and disciplined action in crisis situations. The response came quickly, suggesting that Eagle 6 had been monitoring radio frequencies and waiting for friendly contact. Phoenix 77, Eagle 6. We have 12 personnel, 2 walking wounded, currently in defensive positions approximately 2 clicks north of primary target. Enemy strength estimated at battalion level with heavy weapons. We need extraction within the next hour before they bring in artillery support. Phoenix felt her pulse quicken as she absorbed the tactical picture. Battalion-level opposition meant 300 to 400 enemy fighters, far beyond what she had been briefed to expect. Heavy weapons suggested mortars, possibly even recoilless rifles or rocket-propelled grenades capable of engaging aircraft at significant range. And the one-hour timeline meant that careful approach planning was a luxury she couldn't afford. She updated her flight path, pushing the Black Hawk's speed toward maximum sustainable cruise velocity while maintaining low altitude to avoid radar detection. The aircraft responded with the mechanical eagerness of a thoroughbred pressing toward the finish line, its twin engines delivering power that translated into forward momentum and tactical options. Phoenix could feel the helicopter's eagerness through the controls, as if the machine understood the urgency of their mission. Staff Sergeant Santos was monitoring communication traffic and updating threat assessments based on the SEAL's reports. "Ma'am, based on Eagle 6's transmission, it sounds like they walked into a major staging area for a large-scale operation. This might be bigger than just a Taliban patrol, could be preparation for attacks on multiple coalition bases." Her analysis was sobering, suggesting that the SEAL mission had uncovered intelligence of significant strategic importance. Phoenix processed the implications while maintaining focus on the immediate tactical challenge. If the SEALs had discovered a major enemy operation, their extraction became even more critical. The intelligence they carried could save hundreds of coalition lives by preventing surprise attacks, but it also meant that the enemy would commit significant resources to preventing their escape, making the rescue attempt correspondingly more dangerous. The mountain landscape began to match her remembered briefing materials as Phoenix approached the target area. Distinctive rock formations and drainage patterns confirmed her position, while the absence of visible enemy activity suggested sophisticated camouflage and discipline. These were not amateur fighters hiding in obvious positions. They were professional soldiers who understood the importance of remaining invisible until the critical moment. Phoenix began her approach sequence, reducing altitude and airspeed while scanning for potential landing zones and escape routes. The terrain was unforgiving, with limited flat areas and numerous positions that would provide enemy forces with elevated firing positions. She would need to land fast, load the SEALs quickly, and depart before the enemy could coordinate effective fire against her aircraft. A new radio transmission interrupted her tactical planning, this one from an unfamiliar voice using proper authentication codes. "Phoenix 77, this is Reaper 21, unmanned aerial vehicle currently providing overwatch for Eagle 6. I have eyes on your target area and enemy positions. Recommend you approach from the southeast to avoid observed heavy weapons positions." Phoenix acknowledged the unexpected support, grateful for any tactical advantage in the increasingly complex rescue scenario. Drone Overwatch would provide real-time intelligence and potentially even fire support if the situation deteriorated beyond her ability to manage through speed and surprise. The anonymous pilot controlling Reaper 2-1 from thousands of miles away had become an invisible ally in the fight to bring the SEALs home. The final approach to the landing zone required every ounce of Phoenix's hard-earned experience and instinctive understanding of mountain flying. Wind currents shifted unpredictably around the rocky peaks, threatening to push her aircraft into unforgiving stone walls. The thin air reduced rotor efficiency, demanding constant adjustments to maintain stable flight characteristics. And somewhere below, enemy forces waited with weapons trained on the sky, ready to turn her rescue mission into a funeral pyre. But Phoenix had flown through worse conditions and faced deadlier opponents throughout her career. As she guided the Black Hawk toward the coordinates where 12 American warriors waited for salvation, she drew on every lesson learned from previous missions, every hard-won insight about survival in hostile territory. The mountains might be unforgiving, but she had earned their respect through years of dangerous flying and impossible missions. The rescue was about to begin, and Phoenix was ready to add another chapter to a legend written in the sky above the world's most dangerous battlefields. Below her, the SEALs prepared for extraction, their faith placed in a pilot whose call sign had been earned in fire and proven in blood. The odds were terrible, the risks enormous, but Phoenix had built her reputation on achieving the impossible when failure meant that heroes never came home. As the Black Hawk descended toward the landing zone, Phoenix felt the familiar clarity that came from operating at the edge of disaster. Every control input mattered, every second counted, and every decision would determine whether this mission ended in triumph or tragedy. But she was Phoenix, and rising from impossible circumstances was exactly what Phoenixes were born to do. The sound of approaching rotors echoed off the mountain walls like thunder, announcing to friend and enemy alike that the rescue attempt was beginning. Phoenix was committed now, her aircraft and crew dedicated to the success of a mission that would either save 12 lives or add them to the casualty count. There was no turning back, no safe retreat, only the forward momentum of courage confronting impossible odds. In the thin mountain air above Afghanistan's most dangerous terrain, Phoenix prepared to attempt another impossible rescue, her hands steady on the controls and her heart beating with the rhythm of someone who had never learned to accept defeat. The SEALs were waiting, and she was coming to bring them home, no matter what forces arrayed themselves against her success. The landing zone materialized through the morning haze like a mirage of hope, surrounded by walls of stone and shadow. Phoenix could see the SEALs positioned in defensive cover around the perimeter, their weapons trained outward while they waited for extraction. Professional soldiers maintaining tactical discipline even under extreme pressure, they represented the best of American military training and courage. But Phoenix could also see the enemy positions that Reaper 2-1 had identified, muzzle flashes beginning to sparkle from elevated positions, as Taliban fighters opened fire on her approaching aircraft. The rescue mission had begun in earnest, and every second from this point forward would test the limits of her skills, her aircraft's capabilities, and the courage of everyone involved in bringing Eagle 6 home alive. The sky above the Hindu Kush Mountains was about to witness another impossible mission, attempted by a pilot who had built her legend on refusing to accept that some things couldn't be done. Phoenix was in her element now, balanced on the knife's edge between success and catastrophe, with only her abilities standing between 12 American heroes and an unmarked grave in the mountains of Afghanistan. Phoenix flared the Black Hawk into the landing zone as enemy fire intensified around her aircraft, the distinctive crack of AK-47 rounds passing close enough to hear above the rotor noise. Tracer rounds painted glowing lines through the thin mountain air, creating a deadly light show that would have been beautiful if it hadn't been trying to kill her. She touched down hard on the rocky ground, the aircraft's landing gear absorbing the impact with mechanical precision. Staff Sergeant Santos was already moving toward the cabin doors before the aircraft settled, her crew chief training taking over as she prepared to load the SEALs as quickly as possible. 30 seconds on the ground, she shouted over the engine noise, establishing the timeline that would determine whether they departed as heroes or became casualties themselves. Phoenix kept the rotors turning, maintaining power settings that would allow for immediate takeoff. The SEALs moved with the fluid precision of elite soldiers under fire, each man covering his teammates as they sprinted toward the waiting helicopter. Phoenix could see their faces clearly now, professional warriors marked by exhaustion and stress, but still maintaining the discipline that had kept them alive through impossible circumstances. 2 were obviously wounded, supported by their teammates but still carrying their weapons and equipment. Eagle 6, the team leader, was the last to board, his eyes scanning the perimeter for threats even as he backed toward the aircraft. Phoenix caught his gaze through the cockpit window and saw recognition there. He knew her reputation, trusted her abilities, and was placing the lives of his men in her hands. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like familiar armor. Phoenix 7-7, this is Reaper 2-1, the drone operator's voice cut through the radio chatter. I'm seeing enemy reinforcements moving up the valley from the east, approximately 50 personnel with heavy weapons, estimated time to your position 4 minutes. The update was delivered with professional calm, but the implications were clear. They needed to be airborne immediately or risk being overwhelmed by superior numbers. Phoenix began her takeoff sequence before Santos had secured the cabin, trusting her crew chief's experience to handle passenger safety, while she focused on getting them away from the increasingly dangerous landing zone. The Black Hawk lifted off with the peculiar grace of rotary-wing aircraft under pressure, rising vertically before transitioning to forward flight with mechanical smoothness that belied the hostile environment. Enemy fire followed them into the sky, muzzle flashes sparkling from positions throughout the valley, as Taliban fighters attempted to bring down the escaping helicopter. Phoenix jinked the aircraft left and right, using the mountain terrain to break enemy sight lines while maintaining enough altitude to clear the surrounding peaks. The Black Hawk responded to her control inputs like a living thing, its systems pushed to maximum performance but holding together under stress. One of the wounded SEALs was bleeding more heavily than Phoenix had initially realized, his teammates applying field dressings while monitoring his vital signs. Staff Sergeant Santos moved between the casualties with the efficiency of someone who had dealt with combat injuries before, her medical training supplementing the SEAL's own first aid capabilities. "Ma'am, we need to get to a medical facility as soon as possible," she reported. "One of these guys has lost a lot of blood." Phoenix updated her flight plan, calculating fuel consumption against the medical emergency and available landing sites. Forward Operating Base Kandahar had the best trauma surgery facilities, but it was also the most distant option. There were smaller bases closer to their current position, but their medical capabilities were limited. The tactical decision required balancing speed against quality of care. "Eagle 6, Phoenix called over the intercom. "What's the nature of your wounded personnel's injuries?" She needed tactical information to make medical decisions, understanding that combat leaders often had better situational awareness than medical personnel who hadn't been present during the fighting. Eagle 6 moved closer to the cockpit, his voice